am a man from the planets.
A planet man? Boy, wait till the gang hears about this, silly
Knives Out, it's the Special Access Podcast, and we are back. You've been granted highest level clearance to the one-stop shop for news, reviews, and stories of the weird, wild, and wonderfully mysterious haunted planet on which we live. Join us as we investigate all of the fantastic phenomena, incredible claims, felonious fabrications, and hilarious high strangeness of the planet Earth. Welcome to Special Access. Welcome back, and thank you for tuning in to the latest edition of the SAP. This episode's guest is the one and only Dr. Bob McGwier. Who served as the technical director of Federated Wireless Inc. Dr. McGwier was formerly the director of research for the Ted and Karyn Hume Center for National Security and Technology and research professor in the Bradley Department of Electrical and Computer Engineering at Virginia Tech. At Virginia Tech, he led the overall execution of the center's research mission and led the university's program development efforts in national security applications of wireless and space systems. His area of expertise is in radio frequency communications and digital signal processing. His work on behalf of the federal government has earned him many awards, including one of the intelligence community's highest honors in 2002. Dr. McGwier is also the founder and technical advisor at Hawkeye 360. Bob McGwier helped come up with the idea for Hawkeye 360 based on the premise that small satellite technology had matured sufficiently to conduct signal geolocation. Hawkeye has broken new ground in the fields of RF analytics and space technology, and the team brought to market a variety of products, including space-based RF analytics to customers. Bob also co-hosts a monthly episode of Spaced Out Radio with Dave Scott. And that's an extremely pared down CV I just read, so there's a lot to talk about. Let's get to it. Remember to follow, like, subscribe, comment, share, and most importantly of all, enjoy. Sit back, relax, and get comfy as we introduce Science Bob McGwier. Bob, welcome to the show. It's nice to finally talk to you face to face. You were one of the earliest supporters of the show, and you kept me going in the beginning. So thank you for that.
Oh, you needed to stay going, Dave. It's really great to be able to talk to you, Dave, on your Special Access podcast, where we met in the Dolan Forum, really.
Indeed.
Where I'm now the administrator and moderator. And John, I've known for quite a long time through Twitter, and then John joined the Dolan Forum as well. So it's just really good to be able to talk to two people I consider friends.
Great. Well, thank
you. Hi, Bob.
Welcome.
Nice to see you. It's nice to finally meet you. It's nice to finally meet you. We've been chatting for a good two and a half years now, yep. On and off. Yeah, so it's really nice to see you, mate. Yeah, go for it, Dave. Let's start this off.
Just a quick aside. I miss your beard.
A lot of people do, but I do not.
I understand that. So start off with a little bit of background. What got you into the UFO topic initially? Have you ever seen a UFO?
There's a long-winded version. I'm going to give you the shorter version. When I was under 1 year old, I contracted cerebral meningitis. And I had 3 NDEs. Now, of course, under 1 year old, you don't remember that. But wow. NDEs seem to have something to do with weirdness. So when I was 3 years old, I woke up one morning, walked out and met my mother and her best friend in our den where they were drinking coffee, smoking, and talking about their next bridge game. And I quickly demonstrated to them that through no means anyone could ascertain I had learned to read at a very high level. And that kind of way ahead of the game continued. And when I was 10 years old, I really turned into a unicorn. I mean, I was an amateur radio operator. I built a big telescope. I built rockets and flew them. And so 10 years old, we're talking about 1964. And in about 1970, I built my first computer. And I just kind of kept going. And then when I went off to university with my girlfriend, we went to the same university, and we had met in my hometown. And when we were at university one weekend, I picked her up on Friday to drive both of us home. And along the way, we had an hour and a half of missing time. And I have no memory whatsoever of what went on, but she remembers clearly that we had wound up in the middle of nowhere and that we had lost time. 2.5 weeks after that, I quit the school I was going to. I moved to a different, totally changed my plans and became a mathematician and an engineer, and went on. So I led a long career working for the United States government and had nothing to do with any of this. But in 2016, 15 and 16, I began to hear rumors and began to see evidence. Some portion of it has now become public, but I saw a lot of it before it became public. So, of course, I'm continuing to keep my mouth shut. And then all of a sudden we have TTSA, the New York Times, Politico, and so forth. And Richard Dolan, who I had read about, I decided I would buy his books and read them on UFOs and the national security state, because I was part of the apparatchiks of the national security state. I was a scientist and an engineer working for the national security state of the United States of America. And so I read all these things, joined his forum, and I saw him interview Chris Bledsoe. So after the third interview, before the fourth one came out, I wrote Bledsoe and said, I'm a scientist at Virginia Tech. I'm easy to check out, but here's some links. And I'd like to come over and visit. I've seen your interviews with Dolan. I've seen some other things you've done on YouTube. I've seen a bunch of scientists and people that I actually know are coming to visit you. And I would like to visit you informally. This is nothing formal, but I would like to visit and try to get to know you and see if there's not things that we might do together. So he took like 3 weeks to respond, is my memory of it, but he responded, and we decided to go over after New Year's, and we went over and visited for 4 days. So we had 3 nights together. The first 2 nights were random, but the third night was clear, and Chris and I went out into the evening cold air in January, and we began to observe, and we saw lots of stuff. Orbs doing non-ballistic motion, flash bulbs in the trees that when I thought, man, I really do wish they would come out of the trees so I'd get a good look at them. Within seconds, they came out of the trees into the clear sky as if they had read.
Did you think that? Oh, you did. You did think it in your mind.
Oh, I thought they read my mind.
Yeah.
Because we've got to remember, I had 3 days of full stories from Chris Bledsoe. So I'm not going to tell you that his talking to me about what he's experienced and others have experienced didn't influence my thinking. But the very first thought I had was, they read my mind and they came out into the open. I didn't have any evidence, but that's just what I thought. So let me continue to go. I'm going to give you one more piece of evidence. We kept going. These flashing pop bulbs disappeared. Ryan, his son, that everybody knows by Twitter, came out, and another orb popped. Ryan got to see it. He took a video, and it's not a great video, but it has been put up by both Chris and Ryan in multiple places. So you can hear the 3 of us extolling, wow, look at that thing. And it did non-ballistic motion. It was not. So I checked both of the things we had seen, which looked like gigantic orbs doing weird motion, as not being airplanes and not being satellites, because I know how to track both of those. I've done that kind of stuff my whole life. I wrote a satellite tracking program in the 1980s that tens of thousands of people have purchased and used. So, I mean, I know how to do this stuff, and I checked, and what we saw was neither an airplane that was emitting an ADS-B beacon, which is required in the United States unless you're a military flight, and it was not a satellite from any of the non-dark satellites that NORAD tracks, because they published the orbital elements. So I ruled that out. So Ryan went back in all excited to tell everybody in the house that we had seen this together. And I began noticing what looked like a purple aura in the sky that looked like it was the surface of a lake with waves and wind on it. And Chris couldn't see it because his night vision is not great anymore. So anyway, I looked and I says, Chris, I'm seeing something that looks like purple smoke. And he says, oh, that's been seen here before. So I just kept quiet, kept looking. And within a few minutes of seeing it, it got a little brighter and then all of a sudden winked out. And Chris said within a second, they're gone. After me watching it disappear, saying nothing, he said, they're gone and we can go inside. So that was my second piece of evidence that there's some kind of communication happening between Chris and these entities. So anyway, and then we went in, said goodbye, went home, and within 3 weeks, I had a hitchhiker at my home, and the hitchhiker did all sorts of weird things that we saw. I won't give that long story because it's elsewhere. People can go listen. But the big event was my wife had had a stroke, and she had right side weakness, both right arm and right leg, and it was visible. You could see her drag her foot and this other stuff. And I made a commitment, called Chris, told him that I would work with him. I was committing that we had had a hitchhiker and some weird things had happened. It's just no way this could not be weird because it was apports. I had apports happen inside my home that are impossible to account for. So anyway, 2 weeks after my commitment, she was healed.
Wow.
And to the point where when she went to her neurologist for the last appointment, he released her and told her he could not find the malformation in her brain that caused the stroke anymore. So to me, it's a miraculous healing, and it's not unlike other stories that have happened to ground Chris Bledsoe. So that literally changed my life. And then within a year, beginning of the COVID craziness and other things, I saw that it looked to me like, and I believed inside, that 2019, 2020 was going to be a complete waste year at Virginia Tech. And it was. I got some stuff done. I wound up my contracts. And in May of 2020, I retired, gave up my security clearance. I no longer have internal access to anything. And now I'm part-time adjunct faculty. And I will be doing some research projects this coming year because this coming year students are coming back to campus. But I will mostly be doing that remotely via Zoom because this Zoom remote research stuff, it has just gotten to be nearly perfect. I'll have to go up there, 12 times, 9 times over the academic year to supervise some construction that's going to go on for an instrument that is going to probe the ionosphere for the ionospheric scientists that work at Virginia Tech. So that's literally how I got into it. And then I began remembering the stuff that I told you in the beginning. I went back and asked my mother and family, did they remember the reading? Did they remember the other stuff? Then I began talking to friends in my hometown, and they remembered all sorts of stuff. And I remembered now my mother regularly coming out at night and waking me up from a daze because I had been outside all night looking at the sky where I saw things, but I didn't think UFO. I just didn't think that. I was using my telescope to look at the sky, and she would tell me that I had been outside for hours when I was certain it had only been a few minutes. So I think there were various episodes of missing time, and I saw things, but there's no really startling memories. I don't have memories of abductions or anything like that. So I've had these experiences. They are real. I have zero interpretation of what they are, but it may be determined to try to get involved in finding objective evidence using scientific means so observational science can be done.
Do you think, Bob, that when you had that possible abduction when you were with your girlfriend, did you pick up any skills or anything like that? You notice anything change with you? I mean, some people get like a crazy intuition. So other people say they've got a 6th, 7th, or even a new 8th sense.
Okay, so let me tell you explicitly. I went from I'm going to be a medical doctor. I'm leaving that place, going to a more technical school. I started majoring in engineering, and it became very, very clear within weeks that I had literally there's just no easy way to say this and not sound wrong. So I'm just going to say it and tell people that I am humble and grateful. But I was clearly a mathematical genius after that. And everything about my life has said that. I have these inspirations for technical things to do, and I can MacGyver anything I put my mind to if I believe it can be done. And I've just proved it over and over and over again. And that was if you ever get to read the citation for the Intelligence Community SEAL Medallion you spoke of, you can see what's written in there by the Director of Central Intelligence that I was a MacGyver that went all over the world doing crazy things. And that's literally the truth. And so all of that happened after that missing hour and a half. And I've talked with Samantha Mowat. Her interpretation is I was given instruction. I have no memory of said instruction, but that is her interpretation of it.
Yeah, that was going to be my question. Go ahead, Dave.
How hesitant is the scientific community, and particularly your peers that you communicate with regularly? How hesitant?
I'm going to give you a great answer. My boss, the director of the Hume Center, regularly sends me things about UFOs, UAPs, and we have this system sitting on top of our building in Blacksburg that's situational awareness for orbital vehicles, and he wants to know if it can be used for UAPs. So he knows about Skyhub, and he is interested in doing that kind of work. And he's like very excited about all the stuff that's coming out. So I have personally had only one negative being involved in this, and I thought for a while that I would retire and do a piece of work that I thought was extremely important for the United States government in a context I was familiar with. And I was told that would not happen. And it was clear it was because of my interest in UFOs. So I have watched, I will not name anybody, but I'm going to say that you may be able to figure it out, but I'm not going to verify you're right. I've seen prominent scientists in SCU completely change their public stance because of what's happening. So that this stuff is in mainstream media, and they've gone from being reticent to talk outside about things they believed and things they worked on to now openly talking about it on the outside. So a year ago, one of them, which is now prominent, I asked to be an interviewee on Spaced Out Radio, and I got an excuse. And it was clear it wasn't right because later they've done multiple interviews and the circumstances were worse than the interview I asked them to do. And I don't blame them. They don't want to lose their position or their graduate students or their funding. And I think that stuff is relaxing, especially now that Congress, the Director of National Intelligence, Department of Defense, even the presidents of the United States, current and former, are all talking about these things being real. I think it's just relaxing and changing.
When do you think the conversation might change to some of the more wilder stuff like abductions? There's all sorts of tangible evidence for abductions. To quote John Mack, photographs, radar records, reported pregnancies, burned earth patches, bodily lesions, implants, and scoop marks.
No idea. So I can almost assure you that what's going to happen first is Congress is going to get this briefing from the Director of National Intelligence. Everybody keeps calling it a Pentagon report. It's not. The Director of National Intelligence is making a report to the Senate Select Committee on Intelligence and the Senate Armed Services Committee under a piece of the COVID relief legislation in language authored by Rubio in the Senate Select Committee on Intelligence. And the DNI Avril Haines is going to make the report. In it will be things that the UAPTF gives them, but it's an all of government report. So stuff may come from places we were not aware of that had things that Avril Haines will have access to. I don't know this. I haven't read it. I haven't seen the drafts. I just know that she's been given an all government notice to ask the government what we know. And so what I believe is the most likely outcome is, for the first time ever, there will be some public funding available for science and engineering research projects dealing with this topic.
Wow.
And that will change things forever. And part of it, I believe, is motivated by the fact that it's clear China and Russia, they're all in. They're going to do whatever it takes to figure out how this works. We better get our act together. The way we've done this in the past is we've allowed scientists and engineers at universities to do research, some under contract, some under grants. And so the scope of these contracts and grants, I will not guess, but I'm just guessing that there will be some research activity that is publicly funded for the first time.
Let's go back to you, Bob.
The things you were mentioning, they're not going to come immediately, in my opinion, but they are inevitable, because if you believe Bud Hopkins, John Mack, David Jacobs, a lot of people that do the regressions, the numbers are staggering. Like millions of people have had these experiences.
Yeah, I agree, Bob. I don't think many people in the community actually realize who you are and the quality that you're bringing to our team. Yeah. We don't know near enough about you and your career. I mean, David just read out your CV, and it's, like he said, it wasn't even a tiny part of what you've achieved. Yeah. How did you first get involved with the government and get to work on these SAPs, Blackwell projects? How did you get recruited? Was it straight out of university, or were you given a big break by somebody?
John. That's a really great question. So as I told you, I left one university where I was going to be a medical doctor, left that behind and started studying engineering. And I took courses in mathematics. And one of the professors was this really strange guy. And he taught mathematics by putting problems on the board and letting the students come up and give the solution to the problems. So effectively, it was the Socratic method in action. The students actually figured the stuff out and taught the class with his guidance. So he put up this problem, and I worked on it. And I worked on it for like a week and a half or 2 weeks. And I got it. And after 3 failed tries, and him trying to tell me in a gentle way that I was making a mistake, I got angry and stayed away from school for a week until I got past this place where he was trying to tell me I was making a mistake, and I corrected the mistake. So I went back to the class, I told the deal, and this time there were lots of people from the university who came to the lecture, and it was clear that I had solved a many-year-long unknown problem. And he picked up the phone, and he left, so I decided I would go to Sandia National Labs and then to graduate school. And so I went to Sandia and got a Q clearance and worked there. But that was when I was still an undergraduate. Then I went to graduate school and went to Brown University. And in the time between Sandia and graduate school, he recommended me to the Institute for Defense Analysis, Center for Communications Research in Princeton, New Jersey, and told them I was a natural and that they should bring me in during the summers, for they ran a regular summer program for academics to come in and help the intelligence community with problems that were facing them. So I went multiple summers, and in 1986, I decided that I would not continue as a member of the faculty of the university where I was working, that I just couldn't make enough money to really feel comfortable. And they offered a good salary. So I went to IDA in Princeton, and I stayed 27 years and worked on the intelligence community's problems as a member of IDA. And so he recommended me. It was my undergraduate math professor that I considered my mentor and still do. And he talked the intelligence community into bringing me along. He told them that I was something special. I didn't know he had, but I went, and apparently they thought I was special enough to give me an extremely rare a deal, which is a permanent appointment to the Institute for Defense Analysis research staff in Princeton. But there were like 35 permanent members, and a very large budget, Cray supercomputers. It was an amazing place to work. And I had Fields medalists and Nobel laureates, and Freeman Dyson became my friend. I got to know John Archibald Wheeler and was his kind of confidant and visitor for 15 years. And it was just an amazing thing. And I was very, very lucky and feel extremely grateful for these kind of good things that have happened to me.
And obviously, you can trace all this back to your childhood encounters or memories, because you said your reading became very proficient and you became a math expert. Would you say they were downloads that you received as a child?
I don't know, because I was not aware of it at the time, and I have no conscious memory of these kind of downloads. But I can tell you that when I was 10, I'll give you an example. Let me give you an example that gives you a clear context for me as a 10-year-old. I went to the family doctor, and my mother told him that I was really clever, and he challenged me to take Gray's Anatomy and see what I could do with it. So he gave me his Gray's Anatomy, and I took it home. This was in the fall, and he and his wife came over for Thanksgiving dinner, and I handed him the book back, and he says, "Why are you giving this back?" I says, "I don't need it anymore." And he didn't believe it. So they stood me up on the mantle of the fireplace, and he quizzed me by picking random pages in the Gray's Anatomy, and I could name the Latin name and the function of everything he picked up. So I did not know how a kid can do that without some kind of intervention. Well, because I didn't have a functional anatomy class. I could have memorized the names, but in Gray's Anatomy, there's this weird stuff. You remember, this is 1964. This is not the internet where you got Google. I mean, I had no way of knowing the things that suddenly I knew. My mother remembers all of this really clearly. So she bought me The Invisible Man, the Visible Man, Visible Woman, Visible Head models, and I put them together. And she went and told my fourth grade teacher, who hated me, that I knew all the parts of the body, could name them and their functions. And, I didn't like her either. So it's just 1964, Southwest Alabama. We are talking Bible country. Yeah. So I took the pregnant visible woman into my fourth grade class, and I gave them sex education as a 10-year-old. And it was pretty clear in the night. Everybody in town knew that by the end of 1964 that I was this unusual kid. So I grabbed my dad's CB radio, and I drove the locals crazy. They were using CB radio illegally to run their businesses, and I was interfering with their business operations, even though they were using it illegally. So two of them got together, told my father to send me over to them, and they were going to give me a ham radio license. They helped me acquire ham radio equipment, helped me build things, got me the license. And I can tell you, I am immensely grateful for these two mentors, because amateur radio has been the thing that has affected my life more than anything, and it continues to be. My work today is mostly amateur radio, as I'm a director of ARDC, which is a foundation in amateur radio with hundreds of millions of dollars to give away in grants dealing with radio. And then I was a vice president for engineering for AMSAT, the logo you just put up, and I built multiple spacecraft. And that's where I learned how to do spacecraft engineering and systems engineering. And that was crucial experience, that amateur radio and those spacecraft, in going on and doing Hawkeye 360, which is a spacecraft company.
Did you, you didn't have any consequences? Did you have to keep it from your employers when you got into the intelligence community that you'd had these experiences? I mean, what would they?
Well, I want to remind you what I told you. I didn't remember it. It was like the memory of all of that came back later after the Bledsoe stuff. So I guess I hadn't thought about that stuff in years. I didn't remember. But after the Bledsoe stuff, where I had that trigger, I began recovering these memories. And I didn't know whether to trust them. So I went home and talked to parents, friends, siblings, relatives, and they were the people that helped me fill in these memories. And so that's how I made sure that my memories were not false.
Would you consider regression? Do you trust it?
I'm not allowed. I signed a non-disclosure agreement that is a lifelong commitment, and I cannot go to an uncleared person to do hypnotic regression. And no cleared hypnotic regression will be provided for me now that I'm no longer a member of the community.
Wow, that wasn't the answer.
So that's never going to be allowed.
Yeah, you've told me that in private before, Bob. You always shocked me when you told me before. So the public's knowledge of the black world and the intelligence community is more or less zero. It's a world, so far removed from the average person's level of knowledge and way out their comfort zone. Can you give us a better understanding of the sort of things that really go on? I saw a picture of you. I got it here, actually. I'm going to put it up. Where is it? That one. And you're clearly on a submarine, yeah?
That's me on the conning tower of the USS Hampton. I'm not allowed to tell you where I was or what I was doing, but the Hampton is full speed ahead with the water going over the bow, and I'm up there, and the people have tried to figure out who took the picture by looking in my sunglasses. And
I did. I tried today.
Okay, well, I don't mind telling you. It was the captain, Michael Mathis, captain of the Hampton, and he took the picture of me. And we became friends, and I spent a long time in his company.
So, I mean, straight away, I was wondering when I saw that picture, Bob. Is Bob on a submarine? My brain starts ticking over. Is Bob involved in attaching things to the ocean floor, or for tracking objects, or hacking into communication cables, or getting close to the Russian or Chinese subs to hack communications? Am I totally off the mark? I mean, you're saying you can't tell me.
Well, I'll tell you what I told my mother. I didn't tell her where I was going or what I was doing, but I said, "Mom, I want you to read a book." And she says, "Yeah." I says, "You're an avid reader. Go read the book Blind Man's Bluff, and we might talk about it when I get back." So people can read Blind Man's Bluff, and they will have an answer.
Hang on.
They will have an answer to your question.
Great. Remember that.
Damn it. Let me carry on. Yeah. I mean, the other thing I was going to say about that, Bob, is, I mean, me and Dave are in the UK, and not far up the road from me is GCHQ. Have you ever worked there, or is there any other places in the UK? I mean, there's certain places with large dishes up north I'm aware of as well. Have you ever worked at that location as well?
Both of those places I have been to and worked for quite a time.
Wow.
So I think it's clear that we and the Brits and other English-speaking democracies have a very close relationship. Everybody realizes it's called the Five Eyes. I'm not going to tell you what is done in those places or how we work together, but the facts are we work together. And you're talking about the facility in Yorkshire, and in Cheltenham is GCHQ, and I have been to both places, spent much time at both of them.
Interesting. Is it true that GCHQ is one of the biggest buildings in Europe? I mean, it doesn't look huge from the outside.
When it was built, I believe it is the largest building in Europe when it was built. I do not know if that is any longer true, but I was told by multiple people when it was built, it was the largest building in Europe.
Wow.
The old campus was
that's not even known in the UK. See, that's strange.
Yeah, so it was just this hodgepodge of buildings all over Cheltenham, and all of a sudden this massive facility goes up. I've only ever been in that massive facility once after it was built.
Right. So Dave described in your bio introduction, Bob, that you remember now of the SCU. I know you're a member of the SCU as well. You were at the conference, so I was at the conference the other day. We just had the 2021 conference conference last weekend. Why did you get involved with the SCU? What do you think is the future for them? And will they take the place of UFOology or work side by side, do you think?
My hope is they take the place, and they take the place in that members of the SCU will become funded to do actual research. So the SCU is constantly fighting, trying to get objective data, doing observational science, so that its members and others can take that data assured of its provenance, its objectivity, its untampered nature, and be allowed to do science with some assurance that it hasn't been messed with. And then it can be the subject of research projects that are funded by, maybe the National Science Foundation or the government or DARPA or whatever. So that is my hope. And it is the only institution like it that I am aware of in the United States. There may be others elsewhere. I'm just not as, remember, I'm really a late comer. I really didn't kind of get all the way involved until like 2018 and 19. And only went all the way in after this interlude with Chris Bledsoe, who now Chris and his wife and family and my wife and we've become close friends.
I spoke to, sorry to interrupt, John. I spoke to Grant Cameron recently, who said that whatever it is, passed on a message from Chris to Grant telling him to look at the music, listen to Led Zeppelin's Kashmir and Neil Young's After the Gold Rush. Have you ever had any messages from them?
Well, I know that you're claiming that statement is in fact absolutely true. I have been told by both Chris and Grant that Grant's book about the message in the music that he's published and is fairly popular on Amazon and elsewhere was inspired by Chris Bledsoe telling him that. And that's when Grant began to transition all the way away from nuts and bolts to consciousness. And he credits Chris with making that change in him with these statements about music. So I've always, as long as I can remember, been a musical nut. All of my kids are multi-instrument musicians. I played multiple instruments. I don't know that any of this had anything to do with that, but we just all seem to be musically talented. I've never written music and never recall having got a download, but me and my children can learn how to play a musical instrument very quickly.
I find that the reason I asked the question was I find it very not odd, but I find it parallel yours and Grant's story of how your interaction with Chris Bledsoe led you off on a wild path of ufology. I find it very exciting, to be honest.
So I've interacted with ufology primarily because I'm a seeker of information. So where is this information available? It's not available through anything except the people that consider themselves a member of ufology, because no academic institution is allowing this to be involved. What research projects are going on in the by the national security state are classified. And I never had an actual need to know, so I never got involved. Like the NIDS stuff that was funded by DIA and others, and the Stanford research, a research project into remote viewing and other parapsychology kinds of things, where Kip Green and others were involved with, Hal Putoff and Russell Targ. I mean, no, I've not ever been involved in those things, but it's clear that the government has had widespread interest in dealing with various aspects of what we will call the phenomenon. I have never been personally involved in those, though the last 2 to 3 years, it's clear to me from my internal happenings that something has been changing, because it was clear that evidence that probably should not have been was being passed around all over government. And I did not have a need to know some of the things that I have seen. And some of them I've saw and don't even remember who showed it to me. I mean, but I want to impress upon you how widespread the distribution of what probably was supposed to be closed and official use only as a minimum. We got what was spread all over the place. It would show up in email.
Sounds like that dam is about to crack.
Oh, I believe that it is. I believe that they're hoping for control. But look, investigative reporters, they are not going to listen to the blather that comes out of that report. They're going to dig deep. And you're starting to hear questions now about crash debris, crash craft, etc. They will not give up until they have an answer.
Hal Putoff at the conference, though, seemed to make it pretty clear that he didn't think there was a snowball's hell in chance in hell that we were going to see anything. He seemed to think that anything that was going to come out was going to be in the annex, and
I completely agree with him. I believe we're going to see the last 20 years sightings reports. We're going to hear zero 1945 to the year 2000. Nothing. And the reason I keep saying that is, in order to tell the stories of the 1940s, the crimes, civil injustice, other things that were committed would have to be admitted to. And they're not going to open themselves up to criminal charges or civil suits. They're just not going to. It's just not going to be talked about. And how can you know this? How many reports have you seen coming from the Air Force?
Yeah.
Bupkis.
And the Army. Yeah. Yeah, it's crazy. Go for it, Dave, because Bob answered a few of my questions there, so there's no point in asking some of them, so you carry on.
So, Bob, I'd like to talk a little bit about remote viewing. I'd like to get your take on it as a scientist. Have you ever tried it, for one?
So I've tried it a few times, and I have not pursued it with any great vigor, but I went to a couple of talks and where there was a couple of experiments, and I got beyond random results following what I was told to do. So I've seen things that, which to me as a scientist, it's not enough. So I want a 5 sigma conclusion, and I have not seen enough to give me a 5 sigma conclusion. I have seen enough to pique my interest.
Fair. Good answer. Thank you.
Yeah.
And what about CE5? Have you ever tried that?
I did that, and then just I don't mind telling your audience, since I'm not ashamed of any of my activities, I intend to go and spend time with my SkyHub equipment and other equipment in the presence of multiple people. And one of my first stops is Melinda Leslie.
Wow.
And she carries on CE5 activities daily. Takes these people out in Sedona, Arizona, and daily shows them weird things in the sky.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing that.
The answer is yes. Yes, I think there's something to it.
As do I. Go for it, John.
Okay, so let's talk about Hawkeye 360 now, then, Bob. You're one of them, and let's just show the logo first, and so everyone can see that. You're one of the founders of Hawkeye 360. Dave, I'm nicking your bit here, and I can just realize it's in black.
That's my bad.
Sorry, I've just realized. So can you tell us about Hawkeye 360? Does it fit into your study of UAPs, and does your work with that have any links to SkyHub?
So not directly. So I worked on multiple projects for the United States government to help them take software-defined radio and artificial intelligence and do things differently than they had done before. And so I did some research 2010, 2011, 2012, 2013, and I had convinced myself that there was a lot there, that things could be done differently and more efficiently. And I was working on this contract, and I had these brainstorms. Now, let me explain to you how contracts work. Just because I had a brainstorm It wasn't included in the contract deliverables or the statement of work for the contract I was on. So I kept these brainstorms in the back of my head, and I went, okay, well, let me see if I can talk anybody into doing it. The contract we worked on concluded brilliantly, and they decided not to do it. So my partners and I, Charles Clancy and Chris DeMay and I said, to heck with them. They're not going to do it. Then we've been stomped on by the very large contractors who are scared crapless of us actually succeeding. Let's go get private capital and just start. Let's see where it goes. I mean, what's the worst that can happen? We talk some private venture capitalists into giving us some money. We make a try. If it works, great. So I had these technical ideas. I brought in really high quality people to help me flesh out these ideas, and they are now on these patents with me, where I figured out neat ways to take spacecraft and geolocate RF emissions on the ground. And the ways that it's done is highly mathematical, but it also required current leading edge technologies that heretofore had not been used. They were new technologies. And the thing you should know about space is, if it ain't broke, don't fix it, and don't take away my $1 billion. Mm-hmm. So I was clear. It was clear I was going to run into implacable opposition trying to replace $1 billion enterprise with one that could do the same job for $10 million. I was going to go nowhere. So I just did it privately. And I want to tell you how you can judge the results without me telling you any company secrets or anything classified. Go to the Hawkeye website, look at the team, then go down and look at the board of advisors to Hawkeye 360. You will see directors of NRO, director of NGA, the former people in the CIA, former 4-star generals, former director of the National Security, Richard Clark, former NSC guy that told George W. Bush that the World Trade Center was going to be attacked before it ever happened and was ignored. He's on the board of advisors. That is how you judge whether or not the ideas were any good. Those people are all in. And it's just going to work.
I had already looked.
Yeah. And what would be the application of one of these Hawkeyes?
So I'll give you an example. So recently I've been posting on Facebook and Twitter some applications of note. So let me give you one particular example. It is known that one of the largest sources of ill-gotten gains in the world is the illegal search for protein under the Earth's oceans. So countries have agreed to regulate fishing in order to preserve the populations of the ocean so they don't collapse. And these vessels are going out and hunting outside the territorial waters of any country, and then moving back into the territorial waters to sell their illegal catch.
Chinese.
And so,
boats, yeah.
Anybody. There's lots of people involved, but the Chinese are involved, but there are others. So, and what they try to do is hide their location. So every ship on the ocean, in order to meet its insurance obligations, is required to have an AIS beacon, which sends their location in a transmission so that other ships can hear this transmission and won't run into them in a collision. But what they do is deceive the others by falsely sending out their location in these transmissions. It doesn't matter. I don't need what they're sending. All I need is they are sending. And even if they cut it off, they themselves won't turn off everything. And I just find the source of RF emissions and say, this is a vessel which is not broadcasting AIS. It's not doing this. It's not doing that. It's clearly trying to move along and be dark. And here's where they are, and here's where they're going. And so illegal fishing can be interdicted by Hawkeye 360. And right now it's a second constant cluster in orbit, and it will go up to 128 clusters on orbit when the build out is completed. And it'll be hard to hide if you're transmitting on the Earth from Hawkeye 360 when it's finished.
And can the Hawkeye be applied to the study for UAP?
It depends on whether or not we identify some RF emission. So if there's an RF emission that needs to be located and we know about its existence, then Hawkeye can be applied to locate the source of the RF emission. But the problem is the existence notification. We won't know where to look. So look, I want you to think about one of the problems Hawkeye is trying to solve is we have all these exquisite systems for pointing a camera at the ground and taking a picture in various wavelengths, but there's still a picture. And they can get resolutions down, let's call it a meter. An object a meter across can be imaged easily from on orbit. There's a lot of square meters on the Earth. Which one should you point at? Okay, so you need some way to find which square meter on the Earth to point your exquisite camera. And this is part of what Hawkeye is trying to solve. So let me give you a commercial problem that was of interest to me. I started Federated Wireless, which is a 5G wireless company. And it was clear to me that part of the problem that the cellular companies and wireless companies were having is their cell towers were not coming anywhere close to the theoretical information capacity that they ought to have. And I guessed with some credibility, some evidence, that what was happening was unintended or maybe even intentional emissions were going on near these cell towers and interfering with their proper operation. So they had reduced capacity, requiring them to put up billions of dollars in new cell towers to get full coverage. So if Hawkeye can fly over and locate to a meter the source of the interference, it can be shut down. That will save billions of dollars to wireless companies all over the world.
Well, I was just going to say, even the reason I put my hand up, Bob, I think you probably guessed, is you're looking for locations. Experiences are giving you the locations. Skinwalker Ranch, perfect location. Have you? I mean, I take it you've obviously considered that.
Yeah. So I have some stuff going on, and I need to do some things before I work with or try to do stuff with Brandon Fuel and Eric Bard. But we have already been in communications, and they know of my existence. And I think that they're busy right now. I think that it's clear from recent episodes of this show that they have these emissions. And there are things that I believe that I could do when I have time to do it credibly. But it's one of these things where I'm going to have to be like Travis. I'm not interested in being on his television show, but I will have to take my travel camper with all my toys and go out there and do this stuff for a while to see if I can do the kinds of things I can do. Like this recent thing where they had this comb across the spectrum analyzer. Well, that's a pulse train, and a pulse train could be a digital signal trying to send data. And they're looking at the spectrum, but they're not looking at the time domain to see if it has information-bearing signal in it. So that's the kind of thing I would like to try to do or help with or advise on, but I just don't have time right now. And I don't want to waste their time telling them I can do this when I don't have time to do it. When I have time to do it, if no one else has done it, I will consider it, because I think that place is interesting.
Me too.
Bob, I want you to do it. Make time.
Yeah. Make a GoFundMe.
Do you want to take my question next, mate? I nicked yours. You go for it.
Oh, no. You go for it, John. We're on to Zodiac. Okay. Yeah.
So, Bob, you're good friends with Richard Dolan, and you're obviously running the forum with him, like you said. Rich is interested in a group called Zodiac. It's believed they're related to the other group called MJ12. Rich asked a question to Lou Elizondo in an interview a few weeks ago. He said he was aware of them. Lou said he was aware of them, but he could not say any more than that. Have you heard of them, Bob? And anything you can tell us on that?
Absolutely nothing. And the first time I ever heard of it was in that interview. Everybody's heard of MJ12 and Majestic. So I heard of the the Senate staffer that I'm not going to name, but everybody knows the name of the Senate staffer that told Jesse Marcel Jr. that to go read Whitley Strieber's Majestic, that it was the truth, and MJ-12 was something real. So I knew about MJ-12 and all of this crazy papers that came out and been debunked and not debunked and still a bunch of controversial turmoil. I knew about that, but I had never heard of Zodiac.
I mean, Zodiac, 12 signs of the Zodiac. Yeah,
yep.
Obviously that's probably why the MJ-12, 12 signs of the Zodiac, just in case anyone's wondering why they're probably calling them that. Okay, so I mean, obviously we're thinking that it's something to do with crash retrievals again and recovery team or something like that, but it's going to be interesting to see whether or not Richard finds anything more on it. I've been doing a bit of research on it, if you want to tell him, and I found quite a bit. So if he wants to contact me, I'll put him in the picture of what I've found. Lots of people seem to be... lots of people seem to believe that the current ramping up of sightings and government engagement with the public is down to something that's either happening or about to happen, and that disclosure is actually being forced on world governance by the phenomenon itself. What are your thoughts on that?
It seems credible. I don't have any direct evidence, but I cannot see an event that would cause the Pentagon to suddenly say, okay, we need to admit what's going on. Now, what I can see, given all the time I've spent in the presence of the Navy while it was doing operations, that they are not going to take it being ignored anymore. I'll give you an example. Lieutenant Ryan Graves and his wing person had this interaction with what he calls a cube inside of a clear shell sphere, which he thought might even be some kind of force field, but it was a cube inside of a sphere, and it came within 50 feet of a mid-air collision flying between Graves and his wingman. And that is the kind of thing that will really anger a commander if the notifications of a real problem gets sent back home and nothing's done. My opinion is the Navy's gotten angry, and they're seeing things happen. Recently, Graves said that for 200 days, while they were up and down the Atlantic coast practicing on the Teddy Roosevelt, they saw these things every single day. Every single day they saw a UAP for hundreds of days, and that they were in flight over the fleet for hours. I don't know of any vehicle in our inventory that's not in orbit, that's inside the atmosphere, that can hang for hours. The energy requirements would be so prodigious that we could not do it. And that's number one. And number two, there's no sensory data that says the thing is using some kind of man-made propulsion system, which is obeying Newton's laws of motion. So I think the Navy's had it. I think that they've submarines and other systems, which I will not speak of, have heard things underwater that tell them that something's going on here. And if any of these things ever interacted with our underwater vessels, we'd be in serious trouble. And that they have no knowledge of what is doing it. And given the parameters of which these things believe to be operating under the water, that they can't keep up with it. It's a technology beyond our means or any other known means of any peer adversary that is human. So something's going on in the water, something's going on across near these ships, and I keep seeing things like this 2019 engagement with the kid and others in this kind of 9-ship group that was off the coast of California. And when things fly that close to a ship and it's a warship, they have the right to defend themselves. They didn't even do so much as fire a warning shot to tell them to go away. Now, what this says to me is the commander of the group and the commander of each of the ships had been given clear orders for the rules of engagement if they saw them, do not fire at them, because a warning shot at least would have kept them, could have been tried to keep them away, given they were so close to the bridge and the deck of these ships. So something says to me, given my time with the Navy, that I can tell you commanders do not like risking their command. They do not like risking their personnel. They do not like risking the materiel. They tend to do things that are required, but to also at the same time meet the operational requirement while minimizing risk. And I saw no action to minimize the risk in the 2019 incidents. And I just think the Navy's had it and they want answers.
You don't think there was any nuclear submarines that we were unaware of, and that's what attracted these orbs to the area in the first place?
We already know that. So we already know that the answer to that is yes, because in the incident which you saw the Corbell video, where the people in the command, the CIC on the ship holler splash, 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 mark it. A submarine was tasked to see what they could find and found nothing.
Interesting.
Interesting. Yeah. Jinx.
How do you think they're going to be able to shoot them down? What would they use to shoot them down, Bob? I mean, these are such a strange craft.
What I'm telling you is they didn't even so much as fire a warning shot. So apparently no one's going to try to shoot them down, because they're not even allowed to fire warning shots to warn them, we are here and you shouldn't be here. Over us is controlled airspace, and we have the right to defend ourselves. They didn't even fire a warning shot across the bow of the vehicles that were swarming over them.
So, Bob, what's your best guess at what they are and what we're dealing with? Do you have?
I believe it's I do not believe it is made by any human intelligence on Earth. I do not believe it. I don't believe the Chinese are doing it. I don't believe the Israelis are doing it. I don't believe the Iranians are doing it. I don't believe the Russians are doing it. I believe it's a non-human intelligence.
What about the proposed breakaway civilization proposed by Richard Dolan? Do you lend any credence to that?
I just have had zero evidence that shows me there is this breakaway civilization. And Richard and I have not talked about it in any great detail. And given his recent activities, I think he wrote a speculative work. And I'm not even sure, I don't know this, but I'm not even sure he believes it anymore. And I think part of his reason for staying away from that particular story is Corey Good and all that crap.
Oh, God.
It's just got so much crap hanging around its neck now. Nobody wants to touch it.
Yeah.
That's for sure. Mm-hmm. Can you give us your best guess on what type of technology they might be using? Do you think so you don't think it's the Russians or the Chinese, Bob? And historical cases seem to suggest they're not. Nobody's leapfrogged us.
No, I believe it's space-time metric engineering. I agree with Hal Putoff that that's likely what's happening. And given that in some of these videos, you can see this aura of some type around these craft. And so literally what happens is if you have this intense gravitational field or space-time metric engineering going on near these craft, regular heat coming off of a vehicle, which is doing something, its photons are leaving it in the form of heat because it's a mechanical device. But once it goes through this field, which is keeping them suspended, these photons are Doppler shifted into the visible range. And if it's bad enough, they can be Doppler shifted all the way until they're ionizing radiation. So I think given all of these kinds of observables about the photons that are being emitted by these craft, I am in agreement with Hal that it appears to be some kind of space-time metric engineering. But I don't know.
Is that the orange orbs or the orb type craft?
All of those things. I believe that those are space-time metric engineering is their means of propulsion.
Wow.
Because I don't believe in electrogravitics. No one has shown me even close to the equations that couple the equations of motion that are induced by gravitation and electromagnetism. No one has shown, and of course, if they had, we would have the unified field theory and the theory of everything, and physics could retire. Okay, so I just don't believe it.
What do you make of the ultra materials that Valet and Gary Nolan are looking at now and doing the paper on? I mean, they were saying these things are super expensive they would be super expensive to manufacture, and yet they were just seemingly thrown away in the middle of the deserts and later in the 1940s. So
what I want to tell you is the things that Nolan and Valet said when they were looking at these materials in a lab in a show. It's unobtainium on the Earth. No one can manipulate atoms and the particles around the atoms to have the wrong isotopes and have the wrong configurations and be one atom layer thick materials. We don't know how to do that. We don't even know how the mechanism for how to do it. So Nolan wants to try to use those things for something or to figure out how they are made. But I can tell you that talking to people that do materials, none of them know how to do it. And so given what we have been told by them, see, I haven't done any science, but given what we have been told by them is true, this is unobtainium by human means. So no one knows how to do it.
That's the smoking gun then, Bob.
If they publish research and we know of no mechanism for getting the isotopes that are in these materials, that means they come from a different stellar neighborhood than our sun. That would be a smoking gun of ET, not just ultra terrestrials.
Gary has made it more or less clear, though, directly to me on Twitter, that the isotopes are Earth isotopes, but the smoking gun element, if there is a smoking gun element, is the fact that they're subatomically manufactured.
Yeah, I believe they're subatomically manufactured. Given what they've said is true, subatomically manufactured by, and I want you to understand how truly difficult that is. That means that they have to control both the position and the momentum of the particles simultaneously to arrange these layers. So that violates Heisenberg's uncertainty principle, because you cannot both know the position and the velocity of these particles simultaneously well enough to place them in these layers. And so to me, it's astonishing. I assure you that you can fool Heisenberg's uncertainty principle, but only in one of the complementary numbers, and that's called squeezing. They're not squeezing both of those to get these materials, so they have science we do not have.
Do you think the materials that they've discovered, I mean, if they haven't discovered craft and they've just discovered these materials in the desert, do you think these are gifts, or do you think they're a waste product from a craft? Perhaps.
So you hear rumors of gifts, you hear waste materials, you hear of crashes, and I think that when the occupants of the vehicles traveled here, we presented them with conditions that they had not faced before, because on their own world, if they came from another world on another star, the kinds of conditions we were subjecting them to were not allowed on their world, so it wouldn't bring them down. So these massive radars all around White Sands may have accidentally disturbed the processes that kept the vehicles operating, and they crashed. So I think that's a reasonable supposition, but we don't have the evidence because we haven't seen the debris. So Elizondo has gone on Fox News and talked to people and said that we are in possession of materials from crashed craft. Eric Davis has talked about crashed craft debris. So I haven't seen it. I don't know where it is. But Harry Reid got on and said he thinks part of it's hidden in the bellies of Lockheed Martin. That seems completely reasonable to me. But I don't have any firsthand knowledge.
It couldn't be at Sandia where you used to work then, Bob?
Could be, because it's just people don't know all the things that Sandia does. But let me tell you that they have large storage facilities in mountains for the things that are normally associated with Sandia. Right. That's where things are stored.
Right. Yeah, loud and clear.
I mean, the great
it's clear if they are interested in that general area, they would be interested in Sandia.
Yeah, I'm interested in Sandia.
It was fun working there.
I bet. Bob, I'm tempted to say now at this point, you don't think that Timothy Taylor works there, Bob? Timothy Taylor of American Cosmic fame.
So Tim, when he was interacting with Chris and with our favorite author, claimed he was working with NASA, and he had these NASA engineering jobs, and that he worked on the shuttle, and something happened that allowed him to come in contact with materials that presented unusual things, and that he found he had a facility for interacting with these things. And Tim brought some of these things into the presence of Chris Bledsoe, and Chris had a demonstrable reaction to these materials. And I have no idea where Tim got them. Chris doesn't know where Tim got them, but Grant Cameron has claimed and provided with me no evidence that he was the person that directed Tim Taylor to the gifting field.
Well, I didn't know that.
Grant claims it. I don't know whether it's true or not.
Yeah. Grant told us, I had an interview with Grant on Monday, and he told me that he'd met Tim once and spoken with him on the phone once. So it seems a bit of a stretch to think that he would be the one to then tell him that, something as detailed as that in one short conversation or one meeting. It's a bit of a strange one. Anyway, can we get your thoughts on the current situation then, Bob? The June report, it will drop any day before the 29th deadline. What do you think we can expect to see from it? Is it going to be a last-minute thing?
For the last 20 years, we have seen 120 things that we consider unusual. We don't know what they are. We don't know where they came from. We know they're not ours. We're going to have to work on it. End of story.
Yeah. Can you give us a best assessment of where we are in this topic? Are we dealing with a threat or a potential threat?
All I can tell you is the following. Given all my time in the intelligence community, regularly working with the military, the only responsible assumption that the military can make, given their job, is to assume and therefore plan for this being a threat. Because until they land and say why they're here, we don't know why they're here. We don't know why they're interacting. We know that they are flying in controlled airspace with impunity. And the only way the military is going to treat flying in controlled airspace with impunity is a potential threat until they know different. So if they call them up on ET phone and say, okay, we're ready to phone home and tell you what we're doing here, the military is going to assume that they are a potential threat. And that is their job, is to identify potential threats and to then war game out potential scenarios for what would happen if this happened, that happened, this happened, that happened. Because their job is to plan years in advance for things that go in bad. That's their job. That's what they do every single day. And their job is going to be assume a threat until they know different. And if we as a government know they are not a threat, it is irresponsible to let the military go out ignorant.
Well, whilst I'm not a fan of the threat narrative, I do take your point very seriously. If something is flying in our airspace with impunity, it's taking people from their beds, it's mutilating cattle, it's destroying crops, and we don't know why, that is a threat. although I'm not behind the aliens are evil narrative at all.
So listen, there are lots of people. I can tell you how you get to demons. It's easy how to get to demons. You remember that the United States was formed for religious freedom or freedom from religion. And the religious freedom were persecuted people coming from Europe, living in the United States. And then Thomas Jefferson saw with horror that Quakers were being persecuted by the Puritans in New England. And he came up with freedom of religion, freedom from religion, put it into the Virginia Constitution, and then later he and Adams included it in the Bill of Rights to the U.S. Constitution. So that's the genesis. So, but look, we are, in fact, a country based on religious beliefs from the beginning, and heavily so. So it's different now. Things are different, but we still have large numbers of people who believe strongly. And if you know for a fact that there are women being taken out of their beds, impregnated, and having the fetuses taken from them and experiments done on them, to you, that seems like a demon doing evil. And you can see how they would believe that. To me, just as a human being, the very idea of, say, my wife or daughters being kidnapped and impregnated and having the fetuses stolen from them angers me beyond compare. So I understand this reaction. The facts are, we don't know why they're here. We don't know what their intent is. Maybe they're desperate to save themselves from extinction. We just don't have a clue.
That's it.
And if we do, it's irresponsible not to say so.
For sure. So, Bob, it's the get together this week with the G7 is in the UK. President Biden flew in yesterday, I think it was, and it's being held just down the road from me and Dave in Cornwall. It's not far at all. Do you think they're going to discuss this topic? Do you think it's going to get brought up in the back channels?
There is zero chance it will not be discussed. Zero chance it will be discussed. But let me tell you what's already clear. Avril Haines and Austin are appointed by Biden. That's the Secretary of Defense and the Director of National Intelligence. Biden could shut this down with one pen on a piece of paper. Has he? No, he has not. So, and he signed the bill into law that contained the language mandating that this work be done. So he is cognizant of this and has not stopped it. And I believe that the other countries have things going on. Your experience and others, and Wales notwithstanding, where weird things happen that you were a witness to. Do you think your country doesn't care about what the heck's going on? You saw the military engage in acts of warfare with whatever was going on with these helicopters and other things, to the point where there was an explosion that was seen by a seismometer kilometers away. Okay, that's a big kinetic event. So the very idea that they would not discuss this in back rooms and in back channels to make an overall plan is nuts. They're going to discuss it. Maybe only at the staffer level, but it will be discussed.
Yeah, I agree.
So, Bob, before we go, I'm an avid listener to your Spaced Out Radio episodes. I think the level of guests you managed to get on is astounding. Can you give us any previews as to who you've got coming up in the horizon?
So I have two high-level, very well-known people that we are talking to. And but I never say who it is because I don't want to embarrass them before they actually commit and say yes and tell a time and a date. But it's nonstop. Dave and I always look. Sometimes it's Dave who gets them. Sometimes it's me that gets them. And we just continue to be lucky. We are grateful, truly grateful for these people coming and talking to us. Especially what I want to leave them with is that they've had a level of discourse that's different from going on with other people, because we're going to go in depth and with a basis of knowledge and experience that others might not have. Now, I'm not saying I'm better, or I'm just saying we're different because of our life experiences and our training. Dave is a big time experiencer, and I am a scientist and an engineer and an academic, work for the intelligence community and so forth. So together, I think it's a good partnership, and we're just going to continue to do it. And we do have some names that everyone will have heard of. Hopefully they are coming on.
Who's been your favorite guest so far that you've talked to?
I'll tell you mine. Brandon Fugal, I thought was brilliant when he came on, and he would have stayed on for another hour with you. I think he enjoyed himself so much.
He just completely forgot he was on the radio.
Yeah.
I mean, I had no idea what just let me say one thing, and I don't mean this in disrespectful in any way, but I know he's a Mormon. So I felt, I was careful. Dave and I were careful not to use any 4-letter words. And in one of the interims that did not go out on the radio, but was recorded on YouTube, he let loose with a couple of 4-letter words when he talked about the people who were accusing him of stuff on Twitter. And I went, whoa, this guy is into it. And I felt he really relaxed and enjoyed themselves. And he seems to have fond feelings of or remembrances of that. And I don't see that there's a wall between us at all. And I believe that when the time is right, I will have a conversation with Eric, who is his principal investigator, and with him. And I can drive to Huntsville in 2 hours and talk to Travis. So and other people, Rich Hoffman and others in SCU. And I think we can come up with a plan that I don't get in the way and I get to do things they're not doing that can add. I don't care one thing about being on the show, but I care about getting data that people can work on. So that will come. I need to get the time right so I can grab my travel trailer and go and spend time there.
Oh,
That's exciting. That's a great way to end the show on, actually. It's exciting.
Prospect for the future.
Bob, that's been absolutely brilliant.
I really enjoyed this. This has been an excellent interview. Thanks very much.
I just want to make sure that the two of you know how fond I am of both of you. I have fond memories of our interactions. I think both of you are a class act, and I'm very happy to support this. And I hope that your listeners enjoy our interaction, and I look forward to the next time.
Yes, me too.
Superb, mate.
Thanks, Bob.
Superb.
Just made my day.
Thanks, Bob. Brilliant.
Talk to you soon. Do you want to end there, John?